All right. So 2022 is coming to an end. So crazy. It's so crazy, right? Like, where did this year go? I feel like I say that at the end of every year, but especially this year. And just because like the last couple of years have all been kind of weird.
But I'm pretty sure that was the opening line of the podcast that we had a year ago. So 2021's coming to the year. Where did the year go?
Coming to the year?
Coming to the close.
You said coming to the year.
It's coming to the year.
Coming to the year. So anyway, we like to do this at the end of every year. So if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you may have heard some similar ideas, but we like to, at the end of the year, do a little bit of a wrap up of the past year and then look ahead to the future year and talk about setting goals, right? So this is kind of our episode where we like to help you guys understand how to wrap up your year, how to look back on your year and gain the benefits of it for whatever happened, right? Because sometimes, maybe your training went wonderfully. Maybe you have like achieved tons of goals this year. Maybe you're doing great in your training. That's awesome. You definitely want to look back and celebrate it. Or maybe your training didn't really go the way you wanted it to this year. Also okay, right? Also a good thing, right? It's still important to look back and celebrate it and then learn the lessons in both cases, right? Even if it went well, even if it didn't go well, what lessons can we take away from 2022 to set us up for more success in 2023? And so that's really what we want to focus on today.
Right. Because sometimes if you've had that lack of success, you've already looked back and tried to find some of the lessons. But if maybe your year went super smooth, now would be a good time to look back. A lot of times we're like, oh, it went great. And we don't even try to pick up a lesson from that.
Yeah.
So this is a great time to look back over the last year and say, hey, what went well, what didn't go well, and what can I gain from it?
Yeah. And so I'm curious, like, are you a New Year's resolution kind of person, right? Like, because I always like to say that I'm not a New Year's resolution kind of person. Like, why wait till the new year has kind of always been my mantra. But the way that our brain is programmed, our brain likes to start on a new week, a new month, a new year. Like our brain likes starting dates.
It does. Anything that it can use as a defined sort of like clean slate, fresh page. Our birthday is a good one. The brain just defaults to these like new starts.
And it's totally arbitrary, but knowing that our brain is kind of programmed this way, you can obviously start anything whenever you want to, right? You should never really, in my opinion, wait to set a goal. You shouldn't wait to start a workout program. You should definitely start whenever you're ready. But whenever we do have these kind of arbitrary dates pop up, I think I like to use it just as a good time to kind of check in, right, with myself. So, excuse me. So let's talk about 2022. Like, how did 2022 go for you? First of all, did you have any running goals? All right. So
that's a good first question.
If you're listening to this podcast and you're in a place where you can maybe take some notes or journal, I would highly suggest that. And then you can kind of go through this podcast and kind of use it as an outline, like a framework for you to evaluate your past year and then set goals for 2023. And if you're out on a run or driving, maybe you can come back to this if you want to. You can always bookmark this episode and come back to it and use some of the questions and the prompts that we give you to really sit down and write some of this stuff out so that you actually have it out on paper. So number one, did you have running goals? And if you did have running goals, did you achieve them? Did you make progress toward them, or did you give up on them?
I feel like those are really the three options. Like if you've got a goal sitting there, and you should, and we'll get in as, what do you want for 2023 in the future of like how to set up the future goals. But if you had a goal, you either knocked it off or you didn't. Like these are kind of like, it's one or the other. Right. And if you didn't, maybe you made some solid progress towards it. That was kind of like one of my big goals. I made good progress towards it, but I didn't necessarily achieve the goal. I didn't give up on it. I'm just in progress. My timeline was off. 2022 was not the timeline.
I mean, it's possible that you didn't make progress on it either. So that would be a fourth option, is that like this could be one of those points that we could debate up on a little bit, right?
Whether you didn't make progress, if that counts as giving up on the goal.
Well, did you try?
If you didn't, then you gave up on the goal.
So that's
my third option,
right? But did you try and not make progress?
Okay.
Or is that even possible? Is it possible to try and not make progress? Or would you say that as long as you tried, you made progress toward the goal?
I think as long as you tried, you made progress towards the goal. You might not be able to see it. And here's the issue of like some huge goals is just because you're on like a plateau of training, like maybe you were getting faster and faster and faster, and you seemingly hit a plateau for all of 2022, does not mean that you didn't get anywhere. Like if you were putting in quality training, you're like, I mixed up my training, I added this thing, I changed the way that I was doing speed, and I still seem to be stuck on my plateau. You're coiling the spring. Like 20 is at some point that spring is going to release and there's going to be a breakthrough race. It just may not have happened. Maybe a lot of races you knocked out over the last year all ran very similar times. If you keep hitting at the same time after the same time after the same time, usually that is setting you up for a breakthrough. That doesn't mean that you're stuck. That doesn't mean you'll never get through. It means you're coiling the spring. Yeah.
And I think that's a really good point. And if you're curious about that plateau, go back and listen to our episode from last week. Okay. Episode 285, we talked a lot about what happens when our progress plateaus and what we should do about it, so that we can stay out of that vicious running cycle. So head back and listen to that episode if you've missed it. And if you're curious about plateaus, but I think that is a good point, right? Like, just because you haven't yet achieved that goal that you have set for yourself does not mean you haven't made progress, even if that progress may not be as visible as you want it to be.
Right. That's the issue. Yeah. Sometimes the progress is not just blatantly obvious that you've made progress. Sometimes you tried and seemingly came up well short of the goal. Maybe you tried multiple times, made the little small steps, and you seemed to miss them, but you gained a whole lot of mental lessons along the way.
And perspective,
which doesn't seem like you're making progress because you can't physically see it when you're out on your run, but that mental change, that perspective is in fact a big step towards the goal.
Well, and it's also, like you said, it's building that mental strength of, I'm not seeing the results that I want, and I'm continuing to work at it anyway.
Which is really tough.
And that to me is a huge step forward, right? Like if you can not see progress and still keep working towards it, that takes a lot of dedication and discipline and mental strength to be able to continue to do that.
Right. So if your running goal is rooted in some sort of longer distance, that's a great skill that you have been developing and reinforcing all year.
Right. If, and I say that with a little bit of a caveat though, too, because if you're doing the same exact thing and not moving forward, then you might want to change it up a little bit, right? Like you might want to, but if you've been trying different things, then, and you're still not making the progress and you're still moving forward, like I would love to commend you right now, because you're always trying, right? You're putting in the effort. Maybe you just haven't found the exact right thing for you. And that's, again, why you guys have heard us talk about this before, why personalizing your training plan for you is the most important thing. Maybe you just haven't kind of cracked that code yet and you're still working on it. And maybe you need some help, maybe you need some coaching and some guidance along the way. And if that sounds like you, again, I'm just going to put a shameless plug right here. We would love to help you. We would love to coach you. We've got openings in our group coaching program right now. So if you would like some coaching in the new year, if you would like some guidance to help you achieve your goals, reach out to us. Okay. You can find out all the information on our website, realliferunners.com, or you can send me a DM over on Instagram at realliferunners. Or if you're old school and you want to give me, or I shouldn't say old school, if you want to shoot me an email, you can reach me over at support@realliferunners.com. Okay. So just reach out.
Old school's actual mail.
Yeah. Or like a phone call, right? I know I was like, that's not really old school, but it kind of is. Like, that's like a lot of people nowadays don't use email as much anymore.
People view email as old school. Just send it by a carrier pigeon.
Our kids do. Like, they're like, oh, who emails? Like, what is that? Like, because everything's DM and Snapchat.
The only person they would ever email is their teacher, and clearly teachers are old people. So
so email is the old way to correspond now.
There you go.
Lord have mercy. So okay, so let's talk a little bit about hours, because you said that you didn't really achieve your goal. And I know people kind of like it when we throw our own goals in here, because I think the next one is like, what were the roadblocks that were both in your control and out of your control? And are they likely to continue? Like, let's talk a little bit about this. Like, so what were your running goals this year? Did you achieve them? Did you make progress toward them? Did you give up on them? And then part two is, what were the roadblocks? Okay. And then once you identify those roadblocks of something that may have gotten in your way, also decide, were those things in your control or were they out of your control? And are they likely to continue? So let's talk about you for a little bit.
Great.
Yay.
I love talking about me. It's the best. So one of my big running goal on the year was to complete the 100-mile ultra marathon.
Yeah.
And that race happened on the front half of the year.
In May.
And I didn't make it to the finish line, which is weird because, you know, when you get to the finish line of like whatever the race is, they stick the medal around your neck because it's just a completion thing. But I didn't make it to the finish line. I was like a third of the way still away from the finish line. So I made it like 2/3 of the way numbers wise to my goal. But I definitely made progress. Like it's really difficult to say I completed a 100-mile race if you don't sign up for it, if you don't train for it, if you don't practice how to fuel during the runs. Like there was a lot of progress made towards that goal and a lot of lessons learned in actually going for the race. Like it's not like the first time I tried to run 50 miles, that was not successful either. And I learned a lot of lessons on that one. That was not a race. I just did that around like our neighborhood essentially.
Yeah.
But I didn't make it. And the same thing happened in the 100 is I tried 100 and I didn't make it, but I gained a whole heck of a lot of lessons. And I think I gained even more lessons because I tried it in an actual racing format, which was very cool because then you were there and the girls were there and one of our close friends helped with crewing and everything. Lots of phenomenal lessons over the course of that one.
Yeah.
But to kind of jump ahead here of roadblocks, why not try it again in the back half of the year? But there's limited options for ultras. Like it's not like you can just catch an ultra over every weekend of the year. Like you just have to travel all over the place to do it.
Yeah.
But they're not as easy to come by as like a local 5K. So that's definitely one of the roadblocks is you can't just sign up for them casually over the weekend. They're also much more expensive than a local 5K. And the whole race experience itself is a lot more involved. Like it's a multi-day process. And the timing of the spring, I didn't coach track last spring, so I had the time to sort of fit in the training for it and the race itself. Whereas cross country takes up a whole lot of time coaching cross country during the fall.
Yeah. And there's also, you have to recover from it.
That too.
You know, like if you
mentally and physically,
like it took you a little while to recover from that. It's not like you could have just like jumped in and done another one like quickly. But I would say you made a lot of progress toward that goal, right? Because like you said, the first time you attempted 50 miles, you didn't make it. And then you did complete a 50-mile training run. And then you made it
downpour.
Yeah, that was a crazy day. And then you made it 65 miles. Like, so you've run the longest distance you've ever run. That's a huge accomplishment, right? Like, even though you didn't accomplish that ultimate goal that you had set for yourself, I think that by you setting that huge goal, that got you further than you've ever gotten before. And I think that that's one thing that's really important for us to keep in mind as well, that the point of those big goals is not to achieve them. That is not the only point of setting big goals. The point of setting big goals is to have that lighthouse in the distance for you to shoot towards, for you to train towards, for you to direct all of your effort toward, understanding that you might not hit it. Especially on the first try, right? Like, and that's why it's such a big goal. And you have to be okay with failure. And a lot of us are not okay with failure. We think that, oh, shoot, if I didn't hit that goal, that means that something went wrong.
And that I'll never be able to achieve that goal.
Some people take it there.
I could have said, well, I only made it 65 miles. I guess I'll never be able to hit 100 miles and I'm done with this. And that was also not what I did. I did not immediately sign up for another one. I did not even run another one over the course of 2022, but I did not give up on that goal.
Right. So would you say that you want to try for that goal again next year?
Yes.
Is that a 2023 goal?
That is a 2023 goal. The specifics of it and what race and how that's going to play out, that is something that you and I need to talk about more.
We do.
Perhaps off mic.
Yeah.
But yes, that is a goal that I would still like to strive for.
Yeah. So were you satisfied with your running progress? This is part 2. This is like the next step. So number 1, did you have running goals? And then address those questions that we had. The next thing is, were you satisfied with your running progress?
Well, let's just hit this other one real quick here. Roadblocks in your control versus out of your control.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Because I think this is a super important thing when you look back, because it helps when looking to make a goal again. Like,
Mhm.
were the roadblocks something that came up that was completely out of your control?
Yeah.
Like, I did manage to run a 50-mile thing, even though it was an absolute downpour that day.
Mhm.
The weather was out of my control. I still managed to do it. The weather on the day that I tried to race the 100 was also out of my control.
Mhm.
And it was a billion degrees with
Yeah.
humidity through the roof. And there was that like Saharan dust cloud over the top of us. So it
Right.
was like poor air quality.
Not within your control.
All out of my control.
Right.
But all of the, like the fueling things along the way, I could practice that as best as possible.
Mhm.
I had never tried eating after running 50 miles.
Mhm.
So that was something that I learned along the way. So things in versus out of my control, and are they likely to continue? You know, there's scheduling issues. That's a little out of my control. That will continue. Weather, always out of my control.
Yeah.
And you know, I can't fix climate change this year. So that is also likely to continue.
Mhm.
And I think that's something that all of us should really key in on, of maybe I missed that goal because this thing keeps popping up. Well, can you get rid of that thing or not? Like, because that's going to affect, like, do I want to go after that goal again if this thing will always keep popping up and trying to block me from getting it?
Yeah, that's a good point.
All right, so that's kind of like my 100-mile experience. What about your running for 2022? How did your running goals go?
My running goals for 2022 were a little nebulous at the beginning of the year. I
Okay.
will admit that, because a big thing for me this year was building strength. You
Yep.
know, like I wanted to build strength. That was my focus for the beginning of the year. I actually cut back on my running so that I could try to build more strength. And then kind of what happened throughout the year is that my running felt awful.
Mhm.
I will be 100% honest with you guys, and totally transparent. My running for most of 2022 felt terrible. I felt like my endurance was down, my speed was down. I didn't know what was going on. I was also like feeling very like a lot of shame around it, because I'm a running coach, right? So I'm like,
That's a tough combo.
I coach people how to improve their running. Why is my running feeling so awful? Why is my running not getting better? Why am I getting slower? I don't understand what's happening. I'm following the method. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. I'm getting enough sleep. I'm eating well. I don't understand what's going on. And it made me question a lot. And luckily, I had some doctor's appointments scheduled at the it wasn't really until November.
Yes, it's pretty late in the year.
Pretty late in the year. Well, because my focus for the beginning of the year wasn't speed and distance, so I
Right.
really didn't notice it that well. Like my runs were fine, you know, it wasn't that big of a deal. But there was like a 6-month period, at least 6 to 9 months, where my running just wasn't feeling good, and I was like, okay, I'm just going to stick with it, right? I'm just going to maintain consistency. It's probably just, you know, a plateau. It's probably just something that I'm going through. And long story short, I found out that I had an iron deficiency,
Mhm.
and I started taking an iron supplement, and voila, like I feel so much better. Like my running the last month has felt so much better. Like my speed is coming back, my endurance is coming back. I was getting to one point, especially over the summer where it was really hot and I wasn't feeling well, where I was having to walk on like every run,
Yep.
like I was having to take walking breaks on every single run, and my heart rate was through the roof, and I just didn't get it. And so, my running goals, I would say I didn't really achieve them. I had kind of set a goal of getting faster in the half marathon, but because I was feeling so terrible,
Mhm.
I didn't even train for a half marathon.
Right.
Right. So yes, I would say that I did kind of give up on them, but it was for a good reason when I look back, right? Like it was my health. I was not feeling well enough to like train for a race. And I knew based on how I was feeling tired all the time. I just did not have the energy to devote to training for a race. And I didn't think that that would be a good choice, right? Based on the way that I was feeling. So as far as roadblocks go, I would say that, you know, it was not in my control that I had this iron deficiency. I mean, you could argue, you know, diet, this or that, but I found out the reason for this iron deficiency, and it was not related to diet or lifestyle or anything like that. And so what I realized is that because of this iron deficiency, my body, my muscles were not getting the proper amounts of oxygen, right? Because iron helps to our bodies to produce red blood cells, and red blood cells help bring oxygen to our working muscles. So of course I was feeling tired all the time. Of course I was feeling exhausted on my runs. Of course I wasn't able to have the speed or the endurance that I was
And
used to.
heart rate through the roof.
Heart rate through the roof, because my heart was like overworking to try to get oxygen to my body, right? And now that I've been taking an iron supplement for the past month, I feel so much better. So yes, it was something that was out of my control because I didn't know about it.
Yep.
I found out about it, went to the doctor, and decided to take control of it by taking an iron supplement. And so is it likely to continue? Hopefully not. I mean, I don't know. It's going to be kind of a let's see what happens kind of thing. Like, let's see how my body responds. So far, it's responding really well to the iron supplementation. And I think that, will it continue to respond long term? Because sometimes, the body kind of adjusts, and we'll see what happens. But now I kind of know that I have this issue. So I think I can respond to it more appropriately.
So even if the issue pops back up, you can go get a blood test and see if there's an iron deficiency issue happening again. So it's something that you have quicker control over. I would argue.
Right. Exactly. So So, I'll be getting probably periodic blood tests to kind of keep an eye on it, to monitor it. Obviously, I'm going to be able to monitor my symptoms and how I'm feeling. And I know now what could be causing that.
Yes.
Right. And so I'm going to do everything in my power to help myself continue to feel this way, because running feels good again.
Yeah.
And that's amazing.
Nice.
Like, because it was a struggle. I was on the struggle bus for so many months, and it was really, really hard to keep going out there day after day after day. All right. So forgive us if this episode seems a little choppy. Apparently, today's the day that all loud noises are happening at our house. Like, our dog has been on high alert, barking at everyone today. There was literally a helicopter that just flew over our house and landed like very close by. So if you hear any crazy background noises, we apologize ahead of time, but at least we're using the right microphone this week. Because if you listened to last week's episode, you noticed that the sound quality was not as good. Again, I forgot to put, like, the wrong microphone was selected. So hopefully
the content was phenomenal last week.
Last week's episode was very good. If you guys haven't listened to that episode, head back and listen to 285 too. All right. So
I think we're talking about being satisfied with our running progress.
So now that we kind of know, like, what our running goals for 2022 were, kind of what the roadblocks were that kind of got in our way. The next question you want to ask yourself is, were you satisfied with your running progress?
Right, which a lot of people skip. If the answer is no, they just ignore it, and they're like, all right, time to set a goal for 2023, and just ignore the lack of satisfied with 2022 because that it's uncomfortable. And so people kind of skip the uncomfortable part, but that's where you can learn something about, like, I didn't gain full satisfaction. Just sit there in that uncomfortable and try and figure out, why was it not satisfying to you?
Yeah, I think that, or another thing that people tend to do is they tend to gloss over that part and just try to pick out the positives, right? Which is good.
Yeah.
Like, it's good to see the silver lining. It's good to see the positives. But like Kevin said, it is important to also look at the negatives, to actually allow yourself to be uncomfortable and figure out why you were not satisfied. It is good to acknowledge that you weren't happy with your progress, and that's okay. Because we all go through that. Like, even if it was for a period of time, like, maybe for a couple months you weren't satisfied and then you got satisfied, maybe you changed your goal, maybe you changed and adjusted your training, and then you were able to make more progress toward that goal. So overall, when you look back on 22, you're happy and you're satisfied. But it's also important, like Kevin said, to acknowledge those periods where you didn't, you weren't very satisfied with your progress, and then learn the lesson that you can possibly learn from that point.
Right. I think there's a few reasons why people might not be satisfied. And sometimes the size of the goal is an issue here. Like, it's possible that you achieved all the goals you put out there, and you're still sitting there feeling like, yeah, but I'm not really, like, happy and feeling great about this.
Yeah.
Maybe the goals weren't that big. Like, did you set the bar too low? So sure, you knocked off a bunch of goals, but you're like, yeah, but it wasn't that hard.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes the difficult goals are the ones that actually give the most satisfaction. Even if you're like, well, I got close close to this huge goal may be more satisfying than I knocked off 10 small goals. Like that's an issue. Or the other one is people get so fixated on the numbers.
Yeah.
And then don't remember that the numbers are completely arbitrary. And if the goal is to hit a PR, I want to break 2 hours and a half marathon, and you can always run it just another minute faster. So it's not always necessarily the most satisfying goal.
Yeah. Well, it's always about what you make that number mean.
Yes.
Right. So it's like if you're just setting a number-based goal based on something that somebody else told you should do, then if you didn't have that level of personal connection to that goal, that's one of the reasons that you could be feeling unsatisfied. 'Cause you're like, yeah, I achieved it, but like, whoop-de-doo.
Yep.
Right. Like, it's kind of like when we talk about like our numbers, with my half marathon goal versus your half marathon goal, like years back, it was a really big deal for me to break 2 hours. That was like a big goal that I had set for myself. You didn't even think about 2 hours because you were so far under it that wasn't a goal that you necessarily even meant anything to you.
Right. That was just part of a training run.
Right. Exactly. So understanding like, was the goal that I set too little, like that could be leading to some satisfaction. And then on the opposite hand, was the goal too big? Because if the goal was too big, and we could debate on, is there such a thing as too big of a goal? But if it's a goal that's so big that you don't believe it's possible for you, then that can let you or lead to you giving up early in the year when you're still really far from the goal, right? Like if you don't believe with any part of you that goal is possible, then you're not going to put in the work that you need to put in to actually try to achieve it.
I think that's a good way of phrasing a goal that's too big. If none of you believes this, there's not like a little speck inside of you that's like, man, that'd be really cool. Maybe I could. What about maybe? Like there has to be that slight thought of this is an actual real possibility.
A possibility. Yeah.
Otherwise, sure. If it's so big that it's going to take a lot of progress and it might be beyond a 1-year goal, it's awfully hard to hit the end of January and be like, man, I don't think I'm all that much closer. If the goal is so far away that taking 10 steps towards it doesn't make it look like it got any closer, that's great. It's a huge goal that could be phenomenal for you. But if you can't see the progress along the way because the goal is so far away, it does also lead to the chance of giving up on it.
Yeah. And it's an interesting concept, right? Because one of my coaches and mentors teaches a concept called the impossible goal. Like she says that basically what our brains like to do is our brains love to find evidence why our goals are dumb, right? And why we should not stretch and try to achieve bigger goals, because that requires change. Anytime that you are trying to grow or improve yourself, you are changing in the process, and our brain does not like change. And so if you set a goal that's something you're not able to achieve right now, your brain loves to find all the reasons that you should not go for that, right? Like you should, that it's not possible, that this is going to be too hard. This is going to take too much time. What if you just put all this time and effort into it and you don't get it anyway? You don't end up actually achieving this goal. Then you would have just wasted all of this time, which is also not true. But instead, so she said that basically instead of setting a possible goal, something that you can achieve, you set an impossible goal, so that when your brain does start to argue with you and tell you all the reasons that you aren't going to be able to achieve that goal, you're just like, yeah, I know.
Of course.
Right. Of course. That's right. But I'm going to work for it anyway. Right. And you just decide ahead of time, yes, I'm going to set this really big goal. I know it's probably unlikely that I'm going to achieve it, but I'm willing to work towards it, even though I might not get it. So the process is the important focus here, right? The goal is not to actually achieve that thing. The goal is to start making progress towards that thing. And it's a question of how far can I get towards it? How close can I get to that goal?
Right. Yeah, that was the philosophy I took when training for the ultra at the beginning of the year, because my goal wasn't to get to the finish line. And we tell everybody that your goal, especially on a new long distance, should be just to cross the finish. My goal was to win it, because that seemed crazier.
Yeah.
And that led to the focus and determination. Like the training for an ultra, when part of the training is literally go out there and eat as much as you can while running and see how uncomfortable you can make your stomach feel. Well, like that's not enjoyable training.
No.
It's just not. But that's the training that has to go in. And to say, okay, I want to go out there and finish the race, I don't think I would have put as much focus on training with stomach discomfort as I did. And as it showed up in the race, that's something that I need to key in on even more if I'm going to make it to the finish line.
Yeah. So was your goal too big or too little? Do you feel like that was
I think I hit the right size goal
you
personally.
had a Goldilocks goal for yourself?
Goldilocks goal.
Yeah. Another thing that I think is important to point out here is that if you feel like your goal is really big and you didn't achieve it, I think it's another thing that it's important to kind of evaluate and ask yourself is, were you training for the right thing?
All right, you're gonna have to clarify.
So one of the things that I was thinking about is like, okay, say you have the goal to get faster in the half marathon.
Sure.
Right. But you were actually training for a bunch of like 5Ks along the way. And you were running in a bunch of 5Ks and trying to get a faster park run time.
Yep.
Were you actually training to run a faster half marathon? Or were you focusing on your 5Ks? Because I think that as runners, we tend to try to do multiple things at once.
Most of us
right?
do.
And so I think that it's important to know what your goal was and was that actually how your training played out, right? Because we might say, okay, it was my goal to get faster in the half marathon, or it was my goal to train for my first marathon this year, right? But if I'm also concerned about so say the goal is I want to run my first full marathon, right? But I'm also concerned about what my half marathon time was, right? And I'm trying to get faster on my half marathon.
Or take it more extreme and be like, I also want a PR on the 5K.
Right.
So you keep racing 5Ks every month trying to hit a PR on the 5K. It's difficult to build up the mileage for a marathon.
Right. And so like when you set the goal, was that actually where you were placing your focus in your training? Like look back and actually be honest with yourself there, like was that actually the ultimate goal? And were you training for that goal, or were you also kind of getting distracted by other little goals along the way?
Did you set up your own personal roadblocks so that it made your big goal almost harder to get at than it should have?
Yeah. And so, and this happens often with a big goal, right? Like when we set a big goal that we are kind of unsure if we're going to be able to achieve it, we do set up roadblocks along the way. Like it's like our body's defense mechanism, our brain's defense mechanism, because if you go all in toward a goal and don't achieve it, then there's like this level of shame, right, that comes along with it, because we make it mean something.
Because actually finding your limit is stark.
It's finding your limit, right? Like it's knowing that I put everything I could into this and I didn't achieve that thing. And that is a blow to the ego.
Yes.
Right. So being able to put it all out there on the line is not something that we do easily as humans.
So if you can distract yourself by achieving smaller goals,
right,
that's an ultimate win. Like it's one of the big things. And as a teacher, I see kids when they hit the midterm at the end of the year, they won't study for it. So then if they get a bad grade on the midterm, they can check out and be like, well, I mean, I didn't really study for it.
Exactly. The built-in excuse.
But the flip to this, what you can do with running of like, if you're training for something else, they're like, yeah, I mean, I did really poor on that, but I didn't study. But look, I did so well on these other midterms, and they end up putting all this effort into midterms they probably would have done well in the first place. So yeah, sure, maybe you were training for your first full marathon, but instead of really striving for that, you also were simultaneously chipping away at like a 5K PR because you're more comfortable with that training. Like, the extra little things that you could do to try and take off a little bit of time for the 5K.
Yeah.
And so you're like, look, I've got this goal. And it leaves you with this awkward feeling of like satisfied, but unsatisfied, because you did achieve things, but they weren't actually the big goal that you stated at the beginning. So yeah, you were setting up like mini wins, but like distracting wins. Yeah.
And this is like one of the conversations that you and I had after your ultra. Because like about a month after the ultra, I said to you, okay, like what about the rest of the year? You know, like, are you just going to keep training for ultras now? Like, are you going to go back and train for a marathon? Like, what's going to happen at this point? Right. And I think that at that time, I don't know. And like, I'm curious what your insight is on this at this point in time, kind of looking back on the whole year now, because at that time I said, what about the marathon? You
Yep.
know, like, are you just doing ultras because you're not sure if you can get faster in the marathon? Because I said, I think you can get faster. I think you do have a faster time in you. Is it just that you don't want to do that training, you know? And so you ended up signing up and running a full marathon
Yep.
at the end of the year. When you look back on that, what are your thoughts?
I mean, so one of my other goals over the course of the year was to just enjoy running. Like for so long, I struggle with the whole, disconnecting my race result times from how I was as a person, not how I was as a runner, but literally how I was as a person. And, there have been marathons over the past few years that I've run that were not my fastest marathons that I was super satisfied with. Like this year, I ran the marathon a few weeks ago, and I was satisfied at the end of it, even though it was not that fast of a time for me. So it did help me achieve that. Generally, I think training for an ultra helps me kind of reframe my mind in that direction of enjoying the overall experience of the race and not necessarily saying, well, I have to hit this exact time, or this was a giant waste of my time. Like this was completely unsuccessful. It used to be very stark. It was a successful race or an unsuccessful race purely based off of the number on the clock.
Yeah, but after the marathon, you did kind of have that feeling.
Yeah, I mean,
like you even said that to me. You said, because I could tell your attitude after the marathon was not the same as it was when you had run Jacksonville a couple of years ago. Right. And your immediate thought afterwards was it worth it? Like, I didn't hit the time that I was going for. So was the whole thing worth it?
Right.
And how would you answer that now?
Look, this is the thing, is you can gain positive lessons from every single run. And I don't think that my training was exactly on point for that marathon. There was scheduling and timing issues of stuff that came up, and I chose other things. And going in, you could look back at it and say, I literally set up the roadblocks for me. And so I had the built-in excuse heading into the marathon. I wanted to get the fast time. Like if I didn't think that I could have chased the marathon PR, I would not have signed up for the race. Like that's what I've told you before in the conversations that we've had, well, way before we hit the record button. Like if I did not think that I could actually legitimately chase my marathon PR, I don't think that I would have signed up for this course, to sign up for this race and run it on this like pancake flat course.
Yeah.
But heading forward to next year and future years, I'm not sure how much more excitement I have to try to chase that marathon PR. And I don't think it's because I can't get to the time. It's because over so many years, like I've worked to try and figure out why that time matters so much to me. And one little random comment that my college coach made off on a distance run one day is really not a good reason to continue just torturing myself through mile after mile of a marathon.
Do you remember what the comment was?
Yeah, we were on pace to hit 2:36 for a marathon in the middle of an 18-mile long run. And coach dropped it. He goes, you guys are on 2:36 marathon pace. And like all the other guys out there running was like, coach, we're like, we took off. We all took like a sip of water because he set up cups of water across the back of his Jeep. And then we kept on running. Everybody else was like criticizing me. Like, who cares? Like we're all training for an 8K or a 10K because it was cross country season. It doesn't matter what marathon pace we are on. But that comment always stuck with me of at the time, I was capable conceivably of continuing that run and knocking out a 2:36. So that'd be something cool for me to hit. But is it really worth still going and chasing after that goal at my age to be like, look, yes, back when I was 20, I could have conceivably hit this. And that'd be awesome if I could hit it at 40. Like that, I don't think that I need to get to that goal to be satisfied with my running resume. So the goal itself, that number goal, just doesn't mean as much to me anymore.
Because you've done thought work around it.
Because I've done a lot of thought work around it. Whereas like I think there's more on the table for how far can I go? Because I don't know. This year when I hit mile 65, that was literally my physical limit on that day. but I don't think that's my physical limit, period. I think that like that's a boundary, that's a border that I'd like to keep kind of like pushing and seeing how far I can push that particular thing. And I find that much more interesting than trying to take another minute off of my marathon time. So
why do you think that is?
I think that both of them test physical limits. Like, how fast can I run 26.2 miles?
Yeah.
How far can I run before my body says, and you're done? Both of them test physical limits. One of them, I think, has more reach to it, more runway possibility. I don't know how much more I can chip away at marathon time, but I think that I can push many more miles out on the long distance.
Do you think that you'll ever try to hit that marathon PR again? I mean, you know, obviously who knows what the future holds, but right now,
right now,
what is your thought on that?
All right. There's so many thoughts on this guy, and I've been doing a lot of them lately as I head out on my runs. When you get pretty quick in a marathon, a lot of people ask you, "Oh, are you ever going to do Boston?" Like, this is a question that you get
always.
Like, if you move and you start running ultras, I think people are going to there's going to be a lot more like, "You're doing what? How far are you running? I don't want to drive that far," kind of questions.
Right.
But there's a lot less like, "Are you going to have to do Boston?" And I have no like burning desire that I have to go run the Boston Marathon, otherwise I'm not a real runner.
Yeah.
Like, that's not my thing.
Well, I think that part of that is also because you've qualified for Boston in every marathon you've ever run.
True.
So it's not like this huge goal for you to qualify for Boston.
Right. But
for a lot of people, it is.
I've heard from so many other people like that you have to go experience Boston.
Yeah, I've heard that too. But who's saying that?
I've heard from runners of multiple abilities that have told me that I have to go experience Boston.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
I guess.
You don't have the connection.
I don't.
Yeah.
Whereas this crazy ultra in California, my neighbor used to try to run that every year back in like the 80s and early 90s, and he never made it to that finish line. That race has like an actual connection to my childhood, whereas the Boston Marathon doesn't.
Yeah.
Like, I grew up on the other side of the country. It's still a cool marathon.
Right.
It'd be fun to go run it. I think that it would be a cool experience.
Yeah.
But it has a different connection, and trying to get into this ultra marathon is a lengthy multi-year process. Like, anyway,
it's so interesting though, because it's like, again, that like really highlights the importance of having a connection to your goals.
Yes.
Right. Because if you are connected to your goals, then you are going to want to put that work in to actually achieve them. If you're not connected, you just don't have that same level of like motivation and drive to try to achieve the goal.
Well, yeah. If the goal is cool because you think other people will think it's cool,
right,
it gets really hard to keep pushing towards it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's kind of jumping us a little bit further into 2023. I kind of like pushed us into that a little bit.
Yeah, I know. I saw what you did there.
But let's back up for just 1 second and just kind of wrap up our 2022 goal assessment of the year, right? So as you look at your goals for 2022 and you decide, you know, whether or not you are satisfied, if you decide, was that goal too big or too little for you? Once you decide all of these things that we've kind of walked you through so far, it's important to always remember that there is always something positive to take away from your running over the past year, right? And that doesn't mean that you're just ignoring the negatives. Like we said earlier, the goal is not to just like gloss over the negatives and only pick out the positive things that happen throughout the year. The goal is to honestly assess what happened this year and take the lessons away from both the positives and the negatives. And oftentimes understanding that the better lessons often come from the negatives, from the hardships, from the things that you didn't achieve, because you can look back and say, okay, I set this goal. What happened? You know, why didn't I achieve this thing? What can I do better for next time? That's why they often say success is the worst teacher, right? Because if you succeeded, if you achieved your goals, then all you really know is that what I did worked. But what part of what you did, right? When it doesn't work, you can kind of analyze it a little bit further. It's like, okay, how was my mileage? You know, was my mileage on point here? How was my pacing? Was I honest with myself about effort levels? Was I doing the majority of my runs at that easy effort? Was I sprinkling in enough speed work, right? Because a lot of times we can get very comfortable at that easy level
100%.
and not push ourselves as much. So did I push myself enough? How was my fueling, right? How was my sleep? How was my strength training? You can go back and you can kind of analyze these different pieces and say, okay, like I was pretty good with my runs. I think I was, I really learned how to assess my effort level this year. I think that was a really big thing I took away from this year.
But that right there is
Yeah.
a win on your running journey of 2022.
Huge.
Like, I think
huge win.
people are like,
Because
oh, well, I
that
didn't
will
hit a
pay off.
PR. Okay, but you learned effort level.
But that will pay off for years to come.
Exactly.
Right? That PR is a one-day thing.
Yes.
Right? Or like, in your running circles, you can use it as a bragging point every now and then, right? But like that PR it's great. Congratulations. You should definitely celebrate it. But like you said, learning how to run by effort, learning how to tune into your body and actually honor your body and be able to listen to it and know what your body is telling you is a huge win that will pay off for years and years and years to come.
I mean, I think there's so many wins that some people might discount over the course of the year.
Yeah.
Because looking at the numbers, how many miles did you run over the year? Was it more miles or fewer miles than last year?
Yep.
Like that could be like, oh, well, I didn't run as many in 2022 as I did in 2021.
Mine was fewer because I felt awful.
This was one of my biggest mileage years since like my early 20s.
Yeah.
So that was kind of neat.
So that's awesome.
But there's so many things over the course. Like, did you just figure out how to fuel your body both during the run and after the run? Like, is your eating habits overall better this year than a previous year? That's a huge win.
Did you learn how to incorporate strength training into your routine? And did you actually build strength? Because that's a huge win that's going to, again, pay off dividends for years to come.
Which may be showing up as, do you generally feel less pain both during and after your runs?
Yeah.
Like, was 2021 a painful struggle? You did it, but it wasn't fun because it was a grind. And this year, regardless of pace, are your runs just feeling more comfortable? That's huge.
Yeah. Huge. Did you join a running group? Did you build consistency? Are you just enjoying your runs a lot more? Again, huge, especially for long-term.
Long-term growth. Are you enjoying your runs more? Might be one of the biggest check boxes that you want to check over the course of the year.
Yeah.
Sure, you've got whatever goals you want, but are you enjoying your runs? Because if you're not, long-term growth is really, well, it's almost impossible. I combined pretty difficult, and then I decided I wanted to actually use the word impossible, so it became pretty. That's actually what happened there.
I love the words that you make up sometimes on the podcast, and I'm curious, like, if
I like it, we don't edit.
If any of our listeners ever like catch those words, because like sometimes I sit here and listen to you talk, I'm like, what is that word he just used?
That's not a real word he just said.
Just let it keep going.
Just keep talking about it. Perfect.
So, what is impossible?
To actually achieve long-term, and by that I mean like year over year success if you don't actually enjoy running.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and that's why joy is such a big thing for us. Like our goal. Yes, we want to help you run faster. Yes, we want to help you run longer. Yes, we want to help you achieve your goals. But ultimately, we want to help you bring more joy into your running, because when you are more joyful and when you enjoy your runs more, you're going to be more motivated to get out there and do the work that is going to lead to you getting faster, that is going to lead to you improving your endurance. If you go out there and every run is a struggle and you're not looking forward to your runs and you're constantly trying to find motivation, it's going to be a lot harder for you to make progress, because it's going to be a lot harder for you to maintain consistency. And consistency is the number one thing that you need to achieve any running goal.
That's very, very good point. I mean, that is a stark point. Consistency is the number one thing you need.
100%.
All right.
You can't bypass that one.
What do you want for 2023? All right, time to kind of, how do you scaffold a goal for the overall year? I think we got three-step approach to this guy.
Yep.
And then we'll put in some personal anecdote along the way.
Okay. So when you're thinking about your goals for 2023, the first thing that we want you to do is set a big goal, right? And this can be a goal that maybe you'll achieve in 2023, or maybe it's going to take you a couple of years to achieve this goal. And 2023 is just a year for you to get closer, to get a few steps closer to achieving this goal, right? So with you, Kevin, like running that 100-mile race, maybe you'll achieve it this year. And, because 2022, you just took a step closer,
Yep.
right? You didn't achieve that goal, but you got closer to it, right? So what is that big goal that would really be meaningful for you to achieve, that you would be like, that would be amazing? I want you to think on that level, almost to the point where it might feel slightly impossible, because it actually is impossible for you right now, where you are in your life, where you are in your running right now at this moment. You could not go out and achieve that thing.
Yes.
Right? That's how you know it's a bigger goal, that you are actually going to have to change as a person and change as a runner in order for you to achieve that goal. And that's the really, really exciting part, right? Because as humans, we're either growing or we are dying, really. Like, we're either growing and getting better in our life, or there's not really such a thing as stagnation, right? Because if you stay
backwards
in the same place, you're really moving backwards, right? So we're either moving forward or we're moving backwards. So which direction do you want to move? And I think that running is such a good vehicle and avenue for us to look at ourselves and examine how we are in our lives, how we are as a person, like how are we showing up for ourselves in our lives? Because running challenges us, right? Running is a very clear, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like a very clear marker of our progress on how we're doing, right? Because it is a very numbers-based sport, right? It's very easy for us to kind of see whether or not we're progressing some of the time, right? Like we just mentioned, there's a lot of other ways that you can assess progress other than just your pace or just your time or just your distance, right? There's a lot of other things you can look at. But how are you growing? How do you want to grow in 2023? And the big goal that you set is that guiding lighthouse, right? It's that lighthouse in the distance that is just giving you the direction. Right now, it might seem a little blurry. Right now you might just kind of see the light. You might not actually even see the building, the structure itself.
Right. But there's
but
a
you
light
know
out
that
there.
the light is there, right?
It's possibly so far away that you feel a little bit uncomfortable because it's not close enough that it's providing you that safety that a lighthouse often provides. It's just a light in the distance. If it's giving you a little bit of uncomfortable feelings that's your goal, you're probably making the goal big enough. If you're not feeling a little bit uncomfortable about saying the goal out loud, if you've got a goal in the back of your head, but you haven't told anybody else about it, that might be your level of discomfort. If you're just casually sharing that goal with everybody and people are like, it's a cool goal, that might not be big enough. Like that, it might just be like, oh yeah, that's great. I think I can definitely get to that one. Stretch it a little bit farther. There's a reason they're called stretch goals. And then also make sure that when you're sharing with other people, you're not just sharing your goal because you think that goal will impress others. The goal has to mean something to you, right? Telling everybody that you want to go out and hit a Boston qualifier could impress a whole bunch of other runners around you. But if you don't actually care about hitting a Boston qualifier, you're not going to put in the training runs.
Absolutely. So once you've got that big goal and you have that like exciting thing that kind of gives you those little butterflies in your stomach, what do you do about it? Right? Because it's sometimes when you have those big goals, it can be kind of hard to figure out how to get there. And that's why it's now important for you to break those big goals down into more short-term goals. So ask yourself, what stepping stones do I need to help me get to my big goal? And these short-term goals, you can then stack on each other. And this is the process that we teach inside the training academy, where you set a big goal and then you basically you do a process called reverse engineering. Okay. You kind of work backwards from the big goal to say, okay, that's what I want to achieve. What do I need to do in the 3 months before that? What do I need to do the 3 months before that? Right? Depending on how far out that goal is or how far out your first attempt of that goal is, right? You might not know the exact timeline, and you also have to be willing to be wrong about the timeline, right? It's important to set a rough estimate of a timeline so you kind of know what you're working with. But if you're like, I have no idea how long it's going to take me, but right now I know I need to build up my mileage, or right now I know I just need to get consistent. I need to start running 3 days a week. If you're not there yet, that should be your first goal. I need to consistently run 3 days a week for 3 months straight. That should be your first goal. Building that consistency, building that mileage base, building that strength back up. And then think about races and then think about speed. But right now, if you're not consistent, make that the first goal that you need to get to.
Yeah, these short-term goals, kind of a different perspective than what we were talking about in the last one of how you can set yourself up with like shiny objects that distract you from getting to your big goal. This is finding shiny objects that will in fact take you towards your big goal.
Yeah.
They're stepping stones that you can get there. If the lighthouse is so far away that you can't even see the building yet, but you can see like an island close in the distance, you can get to that guy. Maybe that's along the way, it's along the path, and you can see yourself progressing to it.
Yeah.
If the big goal is so far away, again, that 10 steps towards it doesn't look like you're any closer, then do you really want to take those 10 steps? If 10 steps gets you to your first smaller goal and you think that those steps are at least in the direction of the big lighthouse, that's a win. If you're training to try and complete your first marathon, knocking off 5K after 5K after 5K is a distraction. Trying to be like, all right, I've only raced 5Ks. Maybe I should see if I can race a 10K. Maybe I should build my mileage towards racing a half marathon. These are shorter term goals that will head you towards the direction of racing a longer distance.
Right. And then every time you get to that island, you reassess, right? That's the process of goal setting as well, as you reassess. Am I closer to where I want to go? Yes or no? And then, okay, what is the next step from here? Because you might think that the direction is north when the direction is actually northeast, right? Yep. And the closer you get to that lighthouse, the better you'll be able to assess the smaller steps along the way and the right direction that you want to take those steps.
Yes, of course.
Okay, so once you have that big goal and then you break it down into those short-term goals, the next thing you want to do is establish what are called process goals, right? So say you establish a short-term goal of, I want to be able to run a 5K or a 10K, right? So let's go to the marathon goal example that you just gave. So my goal is to run my first full marathon. Great. Right now, I'm currently at like a 5K distance.
Yep.
All right. So the first goal I want to do is build up to a 10K, right? What do I need to do to actually get to that 10K? So what is the actual plan? What are the action steps that I need to take to get to that goal? So how consistent am I right now? Like, am I running 3 days a week? Do I want to continue with that? Or do I want to add in a fourth day? What does my consistency look like with strength training? Am I strength training at least twice a week right now? Am I performing my mobility at least twice a week right now so that I can be able to take on the increase in training load to build up to that marathon, right? Kind of assess where you are right now. And we've talked about this, I don't know, a few episodes back, about the key to getting to your goals is first knowing exactly where you are. When you go on a road trip and you pull up Google Maps, the first thing that happens is that Google Maps finds your blue dot, right? It finds where you are right now. You have to accurately assess where you are right now before you can figure out even where you want to go and before you can figure out the best route for you to get there.
Right. And then I think going back to consistency is the best way to achieve whatever you've got. We covered consistency with running, with strength, and with mobility. It's hard to maintain consistency with running, especially as you start building mileage. So if you're currently able to run like 3 miles and your goal is run a marathon, you can't just increase mileage. You have to be able to increase your strength and make sure that you're focusing on mobility so that your body is strong enough to handle all the increases in mileage.
Yeah.
So that any sort of aches and pains that come up, like, you don't have to say, oh, my running form is off, but as you run more and more and more, there's going to be tight spots. So focusing on mobility so that you're able to maintain your running form, that it doesn't get hindered as you go off on longer and longer runs and now you feel super stiff the next day, but just trying to continue to increase your mileage. So you're out there now running with like hobbled, awkward form.
Yeah.
Increasing your strength so that you can run day after day, increasing your mobility so that you can run with your normal standard form day after day. These are things that need to happen before you can make the goal of, I just want to run farther than I've ever run before.
Yeah, exactly. So when you look at your 2023, what kind of goals do you have set for yourself right now? Or are you still working on them?
I want to take another good shot at 100 miles.
Do you think you'll do the Keys 100 again, or are you thinking maybe a different one?
I do. That's a more lengthy conversation than we have for this podcast.
Yeah.
Because the answer is yes. I would love to short conversation on the podcast. I would love to go at the Keys 100 again, but I also want to take steps towards trying to qualify for the Western States 100, and the Keys is not a qualifying race.
Right. So we might have to look at something else.
It poses a problem.
Right.
Not a problem. It just poses a challenge.
Not a challenge, just decision.
Yes.
Yeah. And then if I'm looking at my 2023, I definitely, as long as I continue to feel better, like, cause that's going to be a big thing.
2023 go, not anemic.
Yeah. Say no to anemia. But I would like to knock out some like trail runs this year. I wanted to do this last year. I think this was similar to my goals for last year. It just kind of got derailed along the way because
you wanted to build up the strength and then do these other kind of runs, and you built up the strength and then lost oxygen pushing through your body.
Yeah. So I want to try some trail runs. I would love to do a relay race, like a team relay run. So if you decide not to do the Keys 100 this year, I might do it with some friends,
cool.
Like with a team. That could be fun, or like a Ragnar or something like that.
It looked a lot of fun to the people in the vans and buses driving past last year.
They looked like they were having a really good time. And then probably I think I shouldn't say should. I think I'd like to race a half marathon again this year. I really wanted to do the 10-mile cherry blossom race in Washington, D.C., but I don't think that's going to be happening this year.
It sell out in like 3 minutes.
Now there's other issues why I didn't end up applying for the lottery, but maybe that's a 2024 goal.
Oh yeah, there's a lottery to
there's
that
some
one.
other stuff.
If they just put that thing to selling out, it's going to sell out in a minute and a half.
Right. So, but I do want to find like a cool, like just a different race, and who knows if I'll go for a PR depending on the course that I choose, or if I just kind of want to go and experience and have fun with it.
See, this is where I'm kind of at with a marathon is if I just keep trying to chase my marathon PR, then I get stuck on the same courses that I've run in Florida because it's best to just find pancakes.
Right.
So do I want to always have to run a pancake, or do I want to find different, more exciting courses?
And here's the thing I'm thinking is that I will train as if I'm training for a PR, right? So I want to put in the effort level in my training, but then go out and just run and enjoy the race the way that race kind of plays out for me.
Sure.
Right. So if it's like a really hilly course, I probably won't run a PR on it.
Unlikely,
right? Because my current PR is in Key West, which is like a completely flat course, right?
Elevation change of a foot, I think.
So. I mean, the likelihood of a PR on a super hilly course is probably less likely, but not impossible. So who knows? It's kind of just, I think that this year I want to be a rebuilding year for me to kind of get back into racing and do several different types of races. I think would be really fun.
Excellent.
All right, you guys. So we hope that this was a helpful episode for you to kind of look back on 2022 and then look ahead to 2023. Again, if you would like any guidance, any coaching along the way, we've got our group coaching program. Right now, we have 1 or 2 spots available in our one-on-one coaching program if you want more personalized attention, but we do have spots open in our group coaching program as well. So reach out to us, send us an email, support@realliferunners.com. We would love to help you reach your goals, whatever they may be, right? Whether your goal is just to be consistent, whether your goal is to build strength up, whether your goal is to hit a certain time in a certain race distance. We love helping runners to achieve all of those things that will bring them more joy. So, as always, this has been the Real Life Runners podcast, episode number 285. 86. Now get out there and run your life.